What's up, buddy?
Mike, what's going on, buddy?
Not much. I'm sorry I missed our earlier appointment.
It's all right, man. It's understandable. Most people have their. At least you were set on Eastern. I mean, I send Gmail invites all the time, and they're on like the most like funky time zone ever. They're like, did you say 1 or 7 p.m.? Like they're on like whatever Hawaii time. So all good, man. Not a problem. Glad we were able to work it out, and I'm pretty pumped about this cast today.
I know you are. Welcome, everybody, to Crushing Iron Podcast. I am Mike, and with Coach Robbie, who I think may have a few things on his mind today. And I am going to lead the charge by throwing out a few things. Today we're going to talk about common stuff in triathlon, and we're going to address it from a perspective of, is it a fraud or is it for real? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that definitely sounds right. There's just so much, information out there that I think people just kind of listen to and don't really do their due diligence on research, whether it's because they just don't want to, or because they don't have time, or they want to be seen with X, Y, or Z. And, there's just a lot of garbage out there that and a lot of misinformation. So we're going to talk about that today. Hopefully clear some things up, probably stir a little debate and some controversy. But that's all right. That's what we do.
I agree. And, I got to be honest. I'm one of those guys that doesn't do a lot of research. But I did research the articles you sent me. And by the way, I'll be posting the links to these articles in the show notes that, talk about what we're talking about. And they're studies. They're pretty seemingly legit sources, even though I question studies. But as I was digging into these things, there's a lot of interesting points, So I think I just thought, man, we would start out with one that is just littered all over the world of triathlon. You see it everywhere. You see it on people who maybe don't even do triathlon, and it's just really a big trend out there. And I thought we would dive right away into the topic of compression socks.
Yes.
One of your favorites.
It is one of my favorites. We're going to lead off with that. Nothing like overpriced, knitted, worthless stockings.
Well, okay. Why don't you expand on that? I read the article. It's from Competitor.
Right. And
it's based on, well, not based. I don't even want to generalize that, but there is a guy in here, a PhD in sports and exercise science from Massey University, Ajmol Ali, and he says that there's no doubt that many runners trust compression garments, but Ali noted that many of the studies that have found these increases in performance did not use placebo or controlled effect. So, anyway, that's kind of the basis for what this guy's saying. What are you thinking about this, or what have you thought about it?
So, I've always thought that, and this is going back to when these first came out, is that the point, and not to get too overly technical and scientific here, but the purpose of when you work out is my biggest issue is not so much the people who wear these compression socks as much post-race or in recovery, even though I still disagree with it. It's the ones who wear it while they work out. So, and this will be another point of my argument with Ice Bass, is that the point of working out is to damage your muscles. And so every time, let's say you do a 400-meter sprint, what happens is you create these little micro tears in your muscles. When those tears happen, they reduce lactic acid and other components, and so your body has to adapt, repair, and be stronger next time. Well, what compression garments do is they actually prevent those vibrations and those micro tears from happening, because there's less vibration within your muscles. And so you're doing work, but you're not going to absorb and get the whole benefit of the adaptation from wearing them, because you're minimizing what you do. The same can be said for putting on recovery socks right after you get done working out. The point is not to assist your body in recovery every single time. It's to teach your body how to recover on its own, adapt, and get better, because the better your body is within itself and from a recovery standpoint, the better your body is going to adapt from a physiological standpoint.
Sure. So it's kind of in a sense, it may be a short-term crutch or something that people think that it may be helping them, but in the long, because I mean, the obvious reason people want to wear them is because I don't think it's performance necessarily as much as reducing pain, right? In general.
Yeah, I think they're acceptable within a certain window. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by a certain window is I'm okay with that maybe the week before a race, where you're really trying to help minimize any additional damage, and the point is to speed up recovery, not to do any more damage. Mm-hmm. I think people who walk around with them on at race sites are an absolute joke. I mean, it's not doing anything. It really isn't. If you think that sock is powerful enough when you're walking around the expo to get your blood circulated and go all the way back up to your heart, then you've been duped. It just doesn't do that. Go back to your room, prop your feet up. Propping your feet up mm-hmm. will do more work than that. Just old fashioned, propping your feet up on a pillow, old school. And then wearing them during a race on the run, I can see, because you are trying to reduce the damage so you can go longer. But so within that small window, I think they're acceptable, and I can see some of the benefits. I think it's also somewhat of a placebo effect, that you have.
Well, yeah, certainly it's a placebo effect in a lot of ways. But you got to admit they look cool when people walk around the expo wearing them.
Man, I remember the first time my sister came to one of my races in Louisville. It's like 2012 or something, and we were eating at the Panera right there close to 4th Street Live, and they walked in, and there were 10 people online. They all had compression socks on.
Nice, yeah.
And she was like, "What are those?" And I was like, just ignore them. We're not all like that. I think and plus, I think the biggest point of just kind of contention with some triathletes is, if I wear my compression socks, how are you going to see my M. tattoo?
Oh.
So do you know I'm a triathlete because X or because Y? So I think it's a tough call. It's like, am I wearing jeans today or am I wearing slacks? It's like, what kind of appearance do I want to give off today? Fanny pack or no fanny pack? But that's just, it is popular. People wear them, but
Well, the one thing I noticed in that article too was that the idea of compression, which is supposed to move inflammation or move your blood out of that area, is that
Yeah, you don't want blood to pool. You don't want blood to circulate, so it can get things in and out of your system. Mm-hmm. So it can fluctuate, go back up to the heart, get things in and out. And that's the point. It's to circulate it so it can flush out and get the rest of those and kind of filter all the negative stuff out.
Right. And then I think what they were talking about was that for the most part, these compression garments aren't necessarily designed in the way that it would really matter, i.e. it's tighter at the bottom and then eventually it sort of loosens up towards the top. I don't know what that was about, but that reminded me of asking the question about Normatec, the boots that people try. I mean,
yeah, most socks are what they call now graduated compression. Mm-hmm. So they're actually knitted circularly, starting at the tightest. And then the knit kind of gets a little bit less tense, I guess, when you get closer up to the calf. So it's supposed to allegedly, quote unquote, gradually, pulse to where the blood's going up through up through and flushing out the legs. Old school, they used to, surgeons used to have these compression garments, but the compression was static, the same gauge, the same restriction from ankle to the top. So really, all it did was just keep blood there, which for some people is what they need in order to heal an injury. The Normatec, I'll use the boots on occasion. I don't own a pair. I'm not that fortunate. I'll do them at the race for 10 minutes. I think helping flush out some stuff there is pretty good. But I also think it can also do some damage. I'm not a huge fan of post-race massages either, just because some people go way too deep and your muscles are already damaged anyway. So damaging them more is.
Yeah, keep that in mind.
I mean, yeah, I'll definitely. I won't go full throttle on that yet. I'll kind of save that as a teaser.
Yeah, because that's going to come up in not the next one, but maybe the next one. I don't know. Okay, so let's touch on it because you mentioned it. Ice. So in general, compression socks, fraud or for real?
Fraud.
No hesitation. Maybe.
No hesitation. Not even a maybe. Not even a maybe.
Maybe a little bit after the race. I don't know. Okay. So you touched on it, but the second thing we wanted to talk about was ice baths.
Yes.
And we will link to an article on this one as well. But it says here, according to a new study conducted by the University of New Hampshire, post-workout ice baths likely offer no benefits to runners.
0.
Wow. Now this one's got my attention because, as you know, I like to showcase a little bit with an ice bath here and there.
I used to do these.
Mm-hmm.
I have, in the past 2 years, I've recently been a convert. The more I've read and the more that I've studied about and kind of realized what your body is supposed to do and what it's supposed to go through when it comes to recovery. And it's the same reason why people really frown upon taking any kind of ibuprofen or anti-inflammatory after you work out.
Okay.
Again, going back to the compression, you don't want to aid your body in recovery. So the main reason why people started doing these ice baths is when you create these micro tears and the lactic acid builds up, it crystallizes. And when it crystallizes, that's what makes you sore. That's that rock hard feeling you feel the next day, 2 days later. What an ice bath is supposed to do is prevent that or delay it crystallizing.
Okay.
So you won't be as sore. But the point is to damage and to recover and to adapt, not to, impede the progress by making it easier. So you see these people like going out and busting their butts in these hard workouts only to impede their adaptation afterwards because they want to take an ice bath. And you'll get the argument, well, you see NFL players all the time doing ice baths and NBA players doing ice baths. I'm like, yeah, because at that point, they're already adapted. They are just literally trying to recover and just make it to the next day. And still, there are still a lot of studies that say that's still not – it's more of a placebo effect to reduce swelling than it is anything that has to do with anti-inflammatory aspects. But it's more, I think, just on overall perceived fatigue and placebo effect.
Okay, so maybe there is a – are you at a Zumba class, by the way?
I'm taking my lunch break at work. I got some people rocking out in the other room.
Okay. That's good, rocking out. But so the ice bath, is there any reason that we think we should use these? Like if we have chronic inflammation or something like that we're trying to get rid of?
I think if you're doing like back-to-back hard sessions where you're really just trying to get your body able to do the next day, much like an NBA player or an NFL player. They want to cover as fast as possible to work out because they're just trying to literally make it to the next day. They're not trying to increase their performance or adaptation. They're just trying to get back to kind of square one. From that aspect, I think it does have some advantages, but again, kind of in that small window, kind of like the compression socks. Benefits in a small window, still kind of debatable long term. Definitely not to be overused. Definitely a waste of money if you're going and getting ice. Definitely a waste of time from a pain standpoint. Because when I take a bath or a shower, I want it to be hot. But a lot of people are fans of them. A lot of people swear by them. A lot of people swear by the Epsom salt baths too. There's so much information out there. So many ways to go. But keep your baths to soap and shampoo.
Well, okay. I mean, I am a fan of the cold hot therapy in my head. So, in general, I like the idea of going back and forth, but I don't know. That could be in my head, but I do think that there's a lot of people that would say that treatment process, and I don't necessarily know if that's for triath or like athletics per se, but it just kind of gets your blood pumping by the constriction.
Yep.
And maybe makes you feel better in general, but I don't know if it's necessarily so. Ice baths for triathletes, fraud or for real?
Fad. I'd add one more in there. Fraud.
All right. So, not as strong as a compression fraud.
Yeah, definitely not as strong.
Okay. All right. Well, here's one of your favorite topics, and this is based. Well, at least we have notes from an article in the Washington Post that talks about chocolate milk. And hold back.
Okay, I'm going to let you lead this one.
All right. An expert panel on academic research on Friday blasted the University of Maryland's handling of 2 studies of fortified chocolate milk that led to the press release touting the benefits for athletes and others who exercise. Now, it doesn't surprise me that the University of Maryland would be at the center of this, but, I'm a little bit...
You're a little biased.
Well, I'm a little bitter. I mean, at them from other stuff, but they're now in the Big Ten, and this does not surprise me, but you talk to me because you've long touted the anti-benefits, or not anti-benefits, but you've long been, I think, opposed to chocolate milk. So
the commercialization is my biggest issue with it. I mean, it's let's be honest, it's kind of like the University of Florida doing their own study tomorrow about Gatorade. And saying it's the greatest thing, electrolytes. Because there's a huge argument even now as to, do you even need products like Gatorade? Mm-hmm. There's a great book called Waterlogged where people take in way too much Gatorade. Same thing with wheat or dairy that people will get into these days about what's good for you and the commercialization of the breakfast cereal is healthy for you. No, it's not. Mm-hmm. And so, I do agree that a lot of studies, they come from, certain places where their aim is to get a result that will benefit X. Yeah. I get that. But the thing that chocolate milk is the ultimate recovery, I think is just totally false. And I'm probably a little jaded because you see all these sponsored triathletes taking pictures of the chocolate milk and doing this. I'm like, I would bet you $100 that 9 out of 10 of them don't even use it because they stay away from dairy products because it doesn't agree with them, which a lot of them do, or they choose to, I don't know, eat real food instead of chocolate milk, or they're sponsored by a different supplement company and they take a different recovery beverage. But I think it was all aimed at increasing revenue, and they did a great job. I mean, they kept it real simple with their ratios, their carbs to protein, to fat ratio, and it tastes good, and it's easy, and it's cheap. It's always rubbed me the wrong way.
Well, I mean, this particular study, it does say here it was funded in part by the company producing the beverage, and of course you're going to do that. And and also later in the article, it says that the University of Maryland refunded all the money or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's like,
it was a big controversy as to we've all been duped because people don't ever ask enough questions in general. I don't think, people don't. They don't ask and ask and ask, and I don't think people. I think people look to the wrong type of person for an endorsement. So people look to athletes, professional triathletes, baseball players, basketball players, whatever, for an endorsement. That person is paid to endorse this product, just like this University of Maryland was paid to do this study. What I like to look to coaches with a very wide-ranging, intelligent, experienced background and see what they recommend, because most don't even recommend anything. They just recommend real food. And so I think that is, something that people need to look at. Like, look who is suggesting the product, and then just don't take them for their word. Look at coaches. What do they suggest? Look at the research, and then kind of do your due diligence on, and not just listening to the first thing that sounds easy and sounds fun, and everybody's doing it, and I'm on Team Chocolate Milk and whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can speak to this really firsthand from working for several years in the news business, and how PR companies, take these kind of things and send out a press release to the news, and the news just sees the headline and starts rolling with it, and it's incredible. It's something like,
I wasn't aware.
Advil may reduce heart disease or whatever, and then it becomes this monster that rolls out of control. So I've been really sensitive to these issues for a long time because, news, if a news sees something that they think is going to dupe the public or move the public meter, and often they don't even understand it themselves, they will just throw it out there and selectively pick what they want from the press release, and then it's over.
Wow. I had no idea.
Really?
I had no idea the news worked like that.
Oh, well.
I'm stunned.
Here's the thing is, and this is a quick story about that because I think it's very relatable to this point, is that one time I went to a Christmas party for a huge public relations firm, and we just kind of hung out. It was a Christmas party or whatever, and as I'm walking out the door, I had conversations with the owner for throughout the night, and as I'm walking out, she said, "Oh, by the way, you're welcome." And I said, "Welcome for what?" And she goes, "For us providing you content for your news." I was like, wow.
Oh,
so
God.
That's literally how they view it, as in that we wouldn't have news unless there was PR companies.
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah.
Anyway, so I think on that I'm going to ask you, fraud or for real on chocolate milk? I mean, it is food in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a for real fraud.
Okay. All right, man. Here's another huge...
It's for real. It's just not the end all be all that they make it.
Yeah. It's not. It's just the food.
I know I'm straddling the fence here, but whatever.
Yeah, they just it's a food that has been repositioned as a savior, and that's kind of the tricky part.
Yeah.
So, all right, here's another one that's huge, I think, with triathletes and runners, especially, is this idea of stretching. Okay, and now this link that we'll post is from medical research. Something or other that kind of blew my head off because it goes layers and layers and layers deep and talks about in the abstract and whatever. But I think the main reason that that stretching comes under debate right in our conversation is this concept of delayed onset muscle soreness. And when people, the article really talks about the two different types of stretching: long-term, outside of the activity procedures. I assume that's sort of stuff like yoga or stretching thing that actually are they're in their own bubble versus
correct
stretching to loosen up to run,
right?
or do post run.
Yeah, like yoga or general mobility work or physio work, that's not really included what they're talking about. They're talking about the guy who is lining up for his 5K, hasn't ran at all to warm up, and does, his little toe touches.
Yeah, exactly. And was I correct in reading that may do more harm than good?
Absolutely does more harm than good. And okay. I have been on this bandwagon for like the last 3 years. Ever since I quit having Achilles injuries, I was looking back on like why I didn't get injured as much, and it's because I remember reading an article that Paulo Souza, who's a really prominent triathlon coach, about stretching, and so I looked into it, and there is zero research studies that say it's actually proven to prevent injury or that it's even good for you in that aspect. Mm-hmm. Because can you really think of anything worse than taking cold muscles and trying to elongate them as far as possible? No. I mean, it's horrible. And then to the extent of I'm about to do a 5K, and you see these people doing their ridiculous toe touches. You're trying to elongate a muscle that you're about to constrict and contract as much as you possibly can to get as much force and cadence out of it as possible.
Yeah.
So you couldn't be doing any more harm than doing that right there. I think that, and I'll tell people this because, as this podcast continues to grow, I'm a huge fan of like research and some different medical sports research institutes. Is if you're unfamiliar and you don't like reading full research papers, start with the abstract, then read the conclusion, and if you feel like you need more information, go to the middle. Mm-hmm. But it's here. So similarly to the effects on performance, there is no evidence found which suggests that stretching has the ability to reduce either the presence of DOMS or the prevalence of chronic injury in long-distance runners. If you look at any, and I follow this even more when this was tweeted out a couple of days ago from like probably the 3 or 4 top most well-known run coaches in the country. They're like, yeah, we don't do this. Everybody else does at the Y, but none of them do this. They do dynamic stuff, like they'll do some lunge work and some other things to open up their hips, but they won't do any kind of like, all right, let's get on the floor, spread your legs, right finger touch your right toe, left finger touch your left, like we're in PE class in 7th grade.
Yeah. Right.
It's like he couldn't be – it just couldn't be any more bad. And I think it does actually lead to more injuries than obviously it doesn't help prevent any. So if it's even led to one, it's going to lead to more than prevent any.
Yeah, because I think the goal, or at least the theory in mind when you talk about stretching, is this idea of warming up your muscles and increasing your running economy, which can increase your VO2 max in the long run. So what you're saying about the dynamic warm-up is huge, because I remember, and again, I just saw her do this, but I saw the woman, I forgot her name, she set the 800 land record in Tennessee 2 years ago at a sprint event I was watching, or a track event, and I watched her. She was running the 800, and I'm not kidding you when I say she probably ran at least a dozen laps around the track before that race, and then went in the infield and did those high sort of knee raising kick type deals and things like that. But I do not recall her stretching even one bit. It was more about, like you're saying, opening the hips and things like that, and warming up those muscles to explode. So I mean, this is really, and then it must be noted in this what I was reading here, they were talking about the idea of, so a lot of people I think a lot of people are starting to hear, or have maybe heard, that beforehand maybe not isn't the best idea, but still they think afterwards when you're warm it's a good idea. But like in this thing, it was talking about that delayed muscle soreness, and it was saying you're already creating so much stress and strain on your muscles that you're just aggravating the problem when you stretch afterwards.
Yep, absolutely. The same thing, like I was touching earlier with the post-race deep massage.
That's where it was.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, and you look to a lot of coaches, they don't even they don't prescribe athletes getting massages on their recovery day. Because they believe that it's a workout within itself. So they'll do it before the recovery day, because it does do so much damage when you're going in there and starting to work on these muscles that are already torn and damaged and struggling. Let's just beat on them some more. I'm just not a huge fan. I mean, maybe some light rubbing, maybe, but then we kind of
some petting.
Then we kind of get uncomfortable, and you might as well go to the spa down the street if you're going to get something like that.
Well, I mean, that really just means you need a human connection. You need human touch after a long, isolated activity. You need to feel like you belong again.
Yeah, that's it. You just want that human connection of skin-to-skin contact. They say it about parents and their babies. It's all about skin-to-skin. Coming out, finishing your first Ironman is kind of like being reborn. So why not get some more skin-to-skin?
I like it, man. All right, so pre-workout stretching, post-workout stretching, fraud or
Fraud.
Fraud it is. All right, man. Here's another good one that I'm starting to see more and more of when I'm out running or whatever it is. These people running around with these Jason Friday the 13th oxygen masks.
You see that?
Oh my goodness, and it scares the living
Shut
crap
up.
out of me. Yeah.
People actually. Oh God.
You haven't seen it?
I see it. Maybe I hang around the right people. I don't know.
All right.
No, I don't see it.
Yeah. I mean, not
God.
all the time, but just enough to kind of keep me on my toes, you know.
God.
So, how you feel about these oxygen masks?
They have no benefit. They have zero. They have zero benefit. Zero. They don't improve capillary function. They don't improve anything. They just make it harder to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to make it harder to breathe, run faster. It's total garbage. It is total crap. And the only people you see, the people that you see promoting it are like the butt of every joke from other professionals for basically jumping the shark and choosing to just like endorse and take shameless money from a crap product.
Okay. Yeah. Well, isn't the whole idea though that training all these pro triathletes say train at altitude? Isn't it kind of simulating that, or is there a better way to do that?
I'm not sure where they get that suffocating your mouth is the same way as training at altitude. Show me your iron levels. Your iron levels are different after using the training mask because you need more blood plasma, or there's different capillary function. Don't give me this. Make it look fancy and make it look like retro whatever. Come on, man. Just if you're listening and you're wearing one of those, send it back. Do yourself a favor. Unless you're gonna like join the Air Force and start like flying like F-16s, and it might look normal. Send it back. Do yourself a favor. You're a joke. You're a joke.
Oh, come on. That's a little harsh. I mean, they're just trying stuff, you know?
Okay, well, hey, try before you buy. Don't buy it. Send it back. Show me there's a trial period. Instead of running a 7... So let me get this straight. You want to run a 10-minute pace on the treadmill, and you want to put your mask on because it's going to make it harder to breathe. And that's going to increase your aerobic or anaerobic fitness. So you want to increase your aerobic function, but you don't want to do any damage to your muscles, which are what are required and take up this oxygen utilization. So you would rather run a 10-minute mile and not do any benefit to your muscles instead of running an 8-minute mile for intervals, damaging your muscles and making them stronger and faster, and also priming and exhausting your anaerobic and aerobic systems so they can improve the next time.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
But here's the good news to everybody. Since we have, I think, declared oxygen masks a fraud, we have an alternative and a better way to train, to make it tougher on you and what have you. And it says... in addition to increased rate of perspiration, training in heat can increase an athlete's blood plasma level, which leads to better cardiovascular fitness. It reduces overall core temperature, you reduce blood lactate, increase skeletal muscle force, and counterintuitively make a person train better in cold temperatures. Wow, that's a big one. So it's
a huge one. And it's like over the last, 2 years, even just the last 6 to 8 months is when I've started to read more and more about it, is that heat training in the heat is actually much better for you than altitude training. I'm not going to go as far as saying that's probably why all of these athletes that are really awesome and crush people choose to train in Australia in the heat and don't go to Boulder, and they perform so much better. But a couple things that I think that should be and hopefully are fairly obvious. I heat acclimation versus altitude training, I feel like is the equivalent of hills and flats. Flats being altitude, hills being the heat. So from a running standpoint, if you run hills, hills are going to help you when you run on the flats and you run on the hills. Running on flats is just going to help you run flats. It's just not going to help you get any better at running on hills. Same with altitude. It's going to help you perform better at altitude. But what if you go to, and this is a part of the study and the research was that your body becomes so much more adept to being able to be resilient and tolerating these extreme conditions. Well, go train in the 60-degree weather in Colorado 12 months out of the year, and then go train in the heat and tell me how much the altitude helps your body and your skin, sunscreen or not, acclimate and perform in the heat. And I think if you read the study, it's pretty self-explanatory that the blood plasma levels that are assisted and the protocols they take actually help you a lot versus altitude. And there's even studies that show that a post-workout hot bath, if you work out in temperate conditions in 70-degree temps, but right after your workout you jump in a hot bath, that's also supposed to increase your blood plasma levels and give you a more benefit than otherwise.
And then what about post workout saunas and things like that? Is that sort of the same tip or
Yep, that is also part of what they're saying. It makes your body adapt better. And from someone who is like looking at, and I've even read this and kind of doing my Leadville 100 research if I get in the lottery, is I can't train at altitude. And so I've read a lot about what these athletes and runners do to prepare for the altitude when they can't train in it, and they all say heat. Because they believe that I even read some Nashville runners who have done races out west, and they've even said, without really kind of hinting towards any research, is that they believe that running in the heat and humidity in Nashville in August does just as much, if not more, help for their body than going and training in altitude.
Now that's very interesting. So versus the altitude, yeah, but this is kind of backing up my long-time theory about why northern football teams don't do as well in bowl games in the South. But I will.
Let's not get into that, man.
I mean,
I've heard that argument. I've heard it.
I'm right there, dude. I mean, I'm about to write a paper based on this. So and then okay, so we decided that heat training, obviously, I mean, it wasn't really a fraud or for real, but they're both for real. But heat acclimation is much more beneficial and kind of covers more bases than altitude training does. People just don't want to do the heat stuff because they have to choose to run slower to adapt before they can actually get to their pace. And people don't like seeing their heart rate go up and their pace go down. But what you got to think about is you're just training your body to be more resilient and it really only takes between 14 to 21 days for your body to kind of keep up. And then after that, you don't have to do it necessarily every day. You can kind of hold on to that adaptation by just incorporating, 2 to 4 heat sessions per week instead of 6 to 7. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to go into this too far, but I may be overstating it, but it seems like there's a lot of good triathletes coming out of Canada, or endurance athletes. I mean, in all seriousness, like, well, how do they prep up, when they're not outside a lot or something like that?
I'm not necessarily familiar with all of these Canadian athletes that seem to be doing awesome. I know there are two that I follow a lot, Heather and Trevor Wordle. Mm-hmm. They train. They're from Canada, but they live in an RV, so they travel all around the country. Okay. Neither one of them have also ever done very well at Kona. I'm not sure what that has to say, but they don't necessarily typically race in really, really hot, horrible conditions, but they're both ridiculously awesome triathletes. Mm-hmm. And they have an awesome coach. Lionel Sanders, he trains inside, so I'm not really sure that says anything about his training. And he hasn't to date raced well in hot conditions either. So
Okay, let's move on to the next one. And I find this kind of interesting because I am, whenever I mention this to people who don't do triathlons or whatever, it's like, what do you drink out on the run? And I say, one of the main things I drink out there is Coke. And that kind of comes off in a weird way for people in general. It's like, what? So how do you feel about, I think we know, but I mean, people don't listen to every podcast, but talk about Coke for a minute.
yeah, we covered this obviously in the last podcast. Huge fan of Coke. It is for real. It has everything. If I told you that product X had caffeine, sugar, simple carbohydrates, tasted good, was sweet, and gave everything you needed while you were out on a run, you would take it. And then if I just tell you it's Coke, you're like, maybe not. Coke's bad for you. I'm like, you're not obsessively taking this on a day-to-day, but during a run, it is gold. You know it, and everybody who's tried it knows it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's aside from all those things, it just feels like it just sits in your stomach perfectly as well, and it does. It just, I don't know. It feels like the perfect. And I've read this actually before. Even a lot of pro triathletes will say it's like the perfect drink.
Yeah,
which is just kind of weird. So we're gonna give that a
for real.
For real, Coke is for real. All right, we have talked about this as well, but a lot of people, as I mentioned, whenever I'm telling somebody that's having trouble swimming, I always suggest that they use a pull buoy, but they, for some reason, people think that's cheating or whatever like that. But again, we don't have to go into it too deep because we have talked about this before. But how do you feel about pull buoys in general?
They're for real. They are not a toy or a crutch like a lot of people want to say they are. Now, I will say they are a crutch if you just want to use them because you're in the middle of a set and you can't make the intervals and you don't want to work hard, or you're not focusing on what you need to be focusing on while swimming with the pull buoy. Now, if you use the pull buoy and you focus on early catch, lots of power, high turnover, and you're making your intervals, or you only use a pull buoy when you start to feel your stroke breakdown because you're getting fatigued and tired. Total win. I have yet to meet or talk to anyone who has taken up this method and approach that has come back with anything negative to say. Most come back with just, this is how much time I've dropped. Thank you so much. You really can't have too big of a pull buoy either. So, I've seen pros swim with 2 pull buoys before if they're really trying to work on getting their catch better, and they need more elevation in their legs. So it's totally for real. If you don't believe me, go try it.
Is that the 2 pull buoys? Is that the one around the ankle type deal?
No, they just put 2 between their legs.
Okay.
Or I've seen like makeshift ones that you basically made them from home, where they're just like the biggest pull buoy you can find.
I gotcha. Do you have any quick thoughts on the ankle pull buoy?
Fraud.
All right, man. Okay, so you're coming out of the water. It's a little nippy outside, and you're a little bit worried about getting on that bike while you're wet, and it's going to be cold for the first 5 or 10 miles. What do we think about windbreakers in that situation?
They're for real, but there's a better way.
Okay.
So I won't call them fraud. And this is probably one of my more famous Robbie Bruce secrets. That athletes have been like, man, this is like a game changer.
I've used it for years.
Yeah, and people are like, oh, I never thought about that. So for those of you listening who race or compete in cool to 50 to low 60 degree conditions, and feel like you need a windbreaker to start the bike because you're coming out of the water wet already. You're going to create some more wind by going through 20 miles an hour on your bike. Plus, there's additional wind and cooler ambient temperatures. Forego the trendy windbreaker with reflective gear and a cool zipper and cool designs, and having to put it on and then having to find a place to store it once you get hot. And instead of that, I would like for you to use 2 to 3 plastic grocery bags inserted underneath your tri-top and put that on a T1. And what that'll do with is it'll break the wind, i.e., you still see Tour de France riders using newspaper today. In 2016-17, you see Tour de France riders going down these huge descents using newspaper, not a fancy gear, old school newspaper. It works the same way with that. For us triathletes, it blocks the wind. It helps keep your core tip warm. And when you get to an aid station after you warmed up, pull it out, toss it. Just be mindful that you don't, toss it and nail some dude behind you right in the face, and he just, can't see and has a wreck. But
I got to say that's a good point, because it's more like you want to, I think, just hand them to somebody.
Yeah, if you can hand it, but always do it at an aid station so you're not littering. But yeah, that is one of my top secret hints that has helped many an athlete during borderline cold temperatures.
Yeah, it's definitely helped me. So plastic bags are for real.
Yep.
I like it. So I've hit the wall on these things. What do you got? You got any more that you want to, like, one more, two more?
No, I mean, I think we covered most of them. I think those are all pretty good frauds or for reals. If you have any more, email us or hit us up on Twitter or Facebook, and we'll weigh in on the subject.
You're right. Yeah, crushingiron@gmail.com is the email. We're on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter under Crushing Iron. And we would love to hear from you. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and leave us a review. I love the reviews we're getting. It's, feeling pretty good. I feel like we're kind of hitting the spot here, man.
Yeah, we're almost up to double-digit reviews. Getting some great feedback, a lot of great questions via email. We're always happy to answer those as we can. Also like to give a little shout out to the newest Crushing Iron squad member, Matthew Dickinson out of Minnesota. He'll be joining for the year. He's got a lot of great goals, frequent podcast listener, living in the cold in Minnesota, and ready to crush his 2016 Ironman Wisconsin.
And I would like to thank our good friend CC for trying to leave a review but not being able to on iTunes.
Yeah, what an excuse.
I mean,
fraud or for real? CC tried to leave an interview, a review. Fraud or for real?
I don't know. I think it's for real, and like I said, I think it may have helped us in the long run because he.
Yeah, I do. It's CC, if you're out there, keep doing what you're doing, man, and it'll work out at some point. We'd like to keep these 5-star review ratings, and we don't need a 1 or a 2.
All right, man. Well, that'll wrap up this edition of Fraud or For Real on Crushing Iron. This maybe could be a series, actually. If it goes over there, because there's plenty of stuff out there to talk about.
Oh, there's a ton more.
Yeah, keep it coming in. Let us know what's fraud or for real questions. And we thank you for listening today. And I know you got to get going. You're a busy man. I thank you for checking in.
Anytime. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, buddy.